All right, we're going to look at pieces of strings now. So if I grab a random number of letters out of, in this case, Mr. Geiger 123 here, this is considered a substring. It's a piece of the bigger string. And I can pull these pieces out. I can manipulate them. I can look at them. I can see if certain things exist. So now instead of looking at an individual char, we're going to be looking for groups of chars, basically. A substring could be the whole string. It could be a piece of a string. It could be a single char out of a string, but it could be more than one char too. So let's use I went back to our old if with a message box showing true or false here. So the way you do these, it's not using the char class. You're using whatever your variable is that you're trying to search through. So in this case, I'm going to use my name. And I'm going to use .contains. And then inside the parentheses here, we can specify a substring. Okay, so we can look to see if, for instance, Mr. Geiger 123 contains the letters GEI. Okay. So if it contains that, those three letters in that order, we're going to pop up true. Otherwise, our message box is going to show false. True, those letters are there. And if I do GEG, which is not there, I get false. It wasn't found. The .contains works. I can also look. Let's look for the single capital G. And that's true. There is a single capital G in there. But notice I'm using a string right here. I can also use a char. It will allow me to use a char. There's an overloaded method here. So if I provide it with a char, it will still work. True, that character is in there. Okay. So .contains, you can use it with a substring or you can use it with a single char. We can also do, instead of .contains, we can also do starts with. Okay. And it will let me use a char as well. I'm going to go back to my strings though. Does Mr. Geiger start with a G? False, it does not. Does it start with a GEI? False, it does not. Does it start with Mr.? Yes, it does. Okay. So you use the variable name followed by starts with, followed by contains. Well, we could also use a regular string there if we wanted to use a string literal, if we wanted to, and that would work just fine. Let's just start with MA. I better capitalize my M because I want this to come out true. True, it does. Okay, so you could use a literal there with the dot starts with, just like a literal with a .toString after it. It works just fine. Normally, you're probably going to be using some kind of variable. I can't use my letter though, because my letter is a char and this is a string method. I have to use my name in this case. All right, we can also find positions of certain things. So let's do let's do contains again. If it contains GEI, instead of showing the message box, I want to message box.show, let me show the position. I can do index of to find the position, and I can, and let's look at GEI. Oops, And autocomplete messed me up there. And I still have to use my variable name. Okay. So message box show my name.index of GEI. And I left off a parenthesis. Cannot convert from int to string. Oh, because index of is going to give me back an integer. If I want to show it in a message box, I better do a toString on the end. That's unfortunate. So let's do it. So GEI starts at index 4. So that's the position where that phrase that we were looking for started at index 4. So I want to change this around a little bit. Let's do this. I'm just going to get rid of this for now. Let's do list display.items.add, and let's do our string variable, which was my name dot index of GEI. We're just going to print out the index. And remember, items.add takes any object, so it's okay. We don't have to use toString here because it will automatically take the integer that this returns. So we'll start this and we'll do it again. And I get the 4. So same value, GEI was found starting at index 4. Okay. What if it looks for something that's not in there? So I'm looking at Mr. Geiger 123, and I'm looking for the word cat. And it gives me a -1. So if it doesn't find it, it returns a -1. So if I wanted to use this to see if it was found, similar to what we did with lists, I can look to see if the index of that term is greater than 0. I can use it in an if statement to then process it in some way. Okay, so if it does not find the substring that it's searching for, it returns a -1. So let's find Mr. And we know that's the first one in there. So it should start with item 0, which it does. Let's add some things here. So we have some options with index of. We can start by looking at a starting index. So I don't want to look, I want to look for the letters MR, just like it's spelled there, but I don't want to start until 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to start with the 4th position. Oops, excuse me. Okay, so we can give, separated by a comma, we can tell it don't start till index 4 and find Mr. in there. Okay, and it gives me a -1 because it never found the letters MR starting at position 4 and working its way to the end. Okay. Let's look for the letter R. Let's just look for the letter R. I'm going to take the 4 back out of there. So we'll demonstrate this a little more. So the R is in position 1. So it returns, now we know we have 2 lowercase r's in here, one there and one here. So return the first one it found at index 1. So that's a good spot where I can say, hey, don't start till index 3. And then it tells me 9. Okay, so if it didn't start till index 3, it didn't start till here, looked for an R, found it in at index 9. Okay, so we can give it a start position. But we can also tell it how many characters we want to look at. I'm going to start at position 3, and I only want to look at the next 4 characters. Okay, so here's index 3 right here, and I want to look at 4 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're looking for an R, starting at position 3 and looking for 4 more characters down to see if there is an R in there. -1 was the result, so it did not find an R in those next 4 characters. Let's change it for an I. And we'll do it again. And it found it at index 6. Okay, so you have a few options here. You can search for a substring anywhere in, or you can give it a place to start, or you can give it a place to start and how many characters to search for. I want to warn you about this one. People get confused and they say, hey, I'm looking for an I between position 3 and position 4. And they think it's saying this. This is not a position, it's how many characters. So starting at position 3, look at the next 4 characters. Okay, so that's the spot where it's searching right there. Okay, so this is not an ending index. This is a starting index and how many more indexes to look at past that. So be careful of that. We can also use, all these methods also work with a character in the exact same way. Oops, I accidentally deleted a parentheses. So characters work just as well if you're looking for a single character. Found it at item 6. So index of works basically like index of on the list that we did last week. We can also do last index of. And it has all the same properties available to it as index of. This time let's look for R again. Okay, I want to use a string. Okay. So there's an R here in position 1, but there's also an R down here. I think that was position 9 if I remember correctly. But this says last index of, means it's going to start at the end and search backwards. So it should find this R before it finds the one in position 1. So let's start and run it. And it found it in position 9. In the next video, where I'm going to show you how to pull out pieces of a string. So these have been checking to see if pieces of a string exist, and we're going to look at ways to pull those substrings out of a bigger string.